as I was saying, Joy Taylor, every dog has its day. And since I'm a big dog, I've got 2 days. Okay. So now.
You just called yourself a dog?
Yeah, I'm a dog. Yeah, I'm a big dog, a big one.
Kevin Durant is 6'11", who can pull up from 40. Okay. This brother is on that level. I'm talking about offensively.
Do you think you're better than Jarrell Revis is right now?
I'm better than you.
Welcome back to another episode of the Lowdown Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, as always, Mark Brown, and I have a very special guest on the show today, and his name is Brett McMurphy. Now, Brett is a college football insider. I always see his stuff on Twitter, and it's for the Stadium Network, and he actually, as a matter of fact, before we started recording, we actually have some ties with Oklahoma State, as a matter of fact. So I just wanted to say, Brett, welcome to the show, by the way.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mark.
Oh, anytime. And then the fact that you're a college football insider, there's been a lot of commotion going on within the past few weeks of whether college football will postpone the fall season to the spring. And there's already been a few, the Ivy League decided to cancel their fall season. There's been a few schools, and actually junior colleges also they're actually planning. I don't know if they actually made the plan yet, but they do plan on postponing their season into the spring as well. So this is something we've never seen before. So since you're the insider, how is it looking for the Power 5 schools? Well, I know we saw some updates from Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC, but how's everything looking overall?
Well, yeah, the Big Ten and Pac-12, obviously announced they were going to play a conference-only schedule, and then the SEC, Big 12, and ACC plan to announce what they're going to do at the end of July or around August 1st. The reality is, though, nobody right now definitively can say if there are going to be games or not. Look, they're planning for it. They want to play, but the impact of the virus will dictate if that happens or not. I hate to say it, but, right now when we're recording this, I don't think it's a good outlook. I hope I'm wrong. But, ultimately the people that make these decisions are university presidents, and these men and women are usually not risk takers. So I think they're going to err on the side of caution when they finally have to get down and make a decision. And like you said, the Ivy League has already canceled fall sports. The Patriot League has canceled fall sports. Junior College, National Junior College Association has said they're pushing all their fall sports back to the spring. They're going to try to play spring football. So, Mark, I think, towards the end of July, we may have a better definitive answer if we're going to move forward. I think if we do get a season, it's definitely not going to start on time. It's not going to start August 27th. I think it's more likely to start in mid-September. And I also don't think we'll see any teams play 12 games. I think you'll see all these other conferences go to a conference-only format, or maybe a conference-only with plus one non-conference opponent.
Exactly. And plus, like you said, it's a huge risk, too, because, if you really think about it, because by the end of the month, that's when the NBA is supposed to start on July 31st. And speaking of that, their ability to play in a bubble that reportedly costs over $150 million. And you notice that, there's definitely not as many NBA players as college football players. There are at least 13,000 FBS players, and I don't know how they would be able to put them into a bubble, a so-called bubble. So, there's no way that would happen. And plus, there's been – I think as of yesterday, there's been over 70,000 positive coronavirus tests in the U.S. Over 70,000 positive coronavirus tests in this country as of either yesterday or the day before that. But we've been averaging 60,000 plus cases each day in this country. That's over twice as much as it was back in March and April. So this is something that we didn't really see coming. They took, governors took caution by reopening, but some of them, people are putting blame on a lot of governors that they reopened at a fast rate. But at the same time, it seemed like the curve was flattening back in May, so they took the risk. But now it seems like we're suffering from it in a way. So it's like college football, like you said, it's just a lot of uncertainty right now. I'm just hoping that they'll be able to play at least 5 or 6 games, because it'll just. Either way, it's just not going to look the same. It's definitely not going to be the same as we've seen over several decades. And then it happened to be 2020, where basically college football not being canceled, knock on wood, right? Knock on wood, not being canceled, but let's just hope that they're able to get at least some games here and there, because they're already talking about taking out basically non-conference games in the early on in the season. Like Oklahoma State can't even play against Oregon State because the Pac-12 negotiated some plans within themselves not to play against other teams around the country, because you see a lot of states that are in the hot spots, like California, Arizona, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Florida. There's been several states, at least 15 to 20 of them, that are seeing a huge increase in daily cases, and we're seeing players get tested positive, but a lot of them are asymptomatic, thankfully. But that's not the case for everybody.
Yeah, and what you mentioned about the NBA being in a bubble, and that's the challenge with college football. You can't put these student athletes in a bubble. And then on top of that, even if you can kind of, make them as safe as possible, within the athletic department, if they're interacting with other students, there's could be issues or concerns there. And then also just within their own conferences, you look at the SEC and the Big Ten, they each have 14 schools. Well, those are spread out across 11 different states. So you may have different issues in different states within the same conference. So that's some of the challenges that are facing all of these conference commissioners and athletic directors trying to plan and get a football season off the ground.
Exactly. And then did you ever hear any, are you one of the first media personnel to, receive updates regarding each conference, especially the Power 5 schools, whether they're making changes or not?
Well, I mean, some of the conference, they release the information through their public relations office or through Twitter. And, certainly I'm talking to a lot of people, so I want to try to, be ahead of when their official releases come out. But, they've all been, the Big 12, ACC, and SEC have all kind of said publicly in the last week that, they hope to come out with the decision by the end of July, by August 1st. So I don't think, you probably will see different plans floating around online, in the next couple of weeks about possible scheduling, proposals or whatever. Believe me, each conference has about a dozen of them right now, and they're just trying to figure out which one works best. But the people I talked to said, they're not going to make any decision until we get closer to the end of July, because you just think, that's now 2 or 3 weeks away. So you just think about everything that's gone on with the virus and go back 2 or 3 weeks and how much things have changed up to now. So you have no idea how much it can change when we get to the end of July. So that's the best date to kind of look for hopefully some kind of definitive answer either way.
And going off of that, so have they received proposals as in they have best case scenario and worst case scenario proposals, or are they just sticking with one or two?
Well, it's basically, for instance, the ACC, one of their proposals is to play 10 conference games. Well, their ACC commissioner, John Swofford, told me that if Notre Dame needs games, that the ACC would help them out. So, the Notre Dame has already had a number of games canceled. So if Notre Dame needs to add 2, 3, 4 games, whatever that number is, they will be able to count on ACC opponents for that. So there are some models within the ACC where Notre Dame is part of a 10-game schedule, and it's possible Notre Dame could be counted. Games against Notre Dame could count towards the conference standings. They've looked at different things where they would have, with Notre Dame, they have 15 members. They would divide it up into three pods, if you will. And within those 3 pods, each of the 5 teams may play possibly home and home in the same season. I know that sounds crazy, but, they would be able to make these matchups more regional. As far as the Big 12, they play 9 conference games. So do they want to go to – they don't necessarily want to go to 10th conference game, because then you're playing one team twice. They could go to 9 games plus 1 non-conference game, but they'd prefer to play a team from a Power 5 conference. As we talked about, the Pac-12 and Big Ten are out of the mix. So now you've got to get somebody from either the SEC or ACC, but then they have their own challenges because of Notre Dame and trying to fill in on conference schedules for themselves. So, they've got a number of different scenarios or plans. So right now there isn't necessarily a good plan, bad plan as far as this fall. There is as far as the spring. If they can't play in the fall, there's no way football can be played in the fall, then they will try to play in the spring. That is the worst case scenario. It smells like bad fish. I know all the reasons that it's wrong. So many players will sit out because of the NFL draft. You'll have 2 seasons within a 1 calendar year after the season ends, and around Memorial Day, you have 3 months off. The next season would start. All the challenges, the recruiting calendar, all of those things. I understand that, but it's better than the alternative if we get to that point, and that is no football. So they would prefer to play in the fall, try to get in as many games as possible. If that's impossible to do, play in the fall, then they'll set their sights on the spring.
And just going off of that, I mean, like you said, that's probably like the best bet if things were to get worse. That's why basically every decision that is made now, you know how everybody's like, that's how the World Health Organization and obviously the CDC is regarding everybody. They're requiring everybody to wear masks, right? So wear a mask, keep your, continue to practice social distancing, and make sure if you're feeling sick, stay at home. But it just seems like that's really hard to do when there's over 300 million people that live in America. It's really hard to get people to do that, and it seems like it's became a political issue for a lot of people around. People are protesting, saying they don't want to wear masks in other states. But I'm not going to get into that. But it just seems like it's really hard to get people to actually listen and to actually make those decisions, because that's going to basically determine whether college football can happen or not, believe it or not. And then I noticed for the Big 12, from this article I saw on ESPN yesterday, or actually it might have been this morning, it was that Lincoln Riley was the only head coach who publicly endorsed spring football, and it seemed like other coaches didn't seem ready to, close the door for a tradition this fall, because a lot of these coaches are ready to play. They don't want, like you said, they don't want to, hinder their recruiting possibilities with other players, and then, especially for incoming freshmen, because like they have to wait until the spring, and then like you said, that's also gonna, I feel like that'll mess with somebody's eligibility too. Like, so I guess if you are an incoming freshman, does your clock not start until right when the season starts if it were to be in the spring? So that's going to be very confusing for a lot of players. I mean, that's going to throw everybody off their game, because we've never seen anything like this before.
Well, they would certainly, the NCAA would tweak or adjust all of the eligibility rules. So they're not going to say, well, you didn't play in the fall, so you lose the season, now they're playing in the spring. I mean, they will have to basically rip up the NCAA rule book for the next 2 years to take into account all the changes and challenges that we've had with COVID. But the thing with Lincoln wanting to play in the spring, there are a number of athletic directors that I've talked to that agree with him. However, there are a lot of athletic directors that would rather play in the fall, because their issue is, if we can play in the fall, but we don't play in the fall because we don't think we're going to get an entire season in, and we move it to the spring, there's no guarantee that we can play in the spring. I mean, remember, this thing broke out in March. So that was in the spring, basically. So that's why if they're able to play in the fall, they want to play in the fall. They don't want to push it back to the spring unless it's 100%. They're 100% unable to play in the fall, because their biggest concern is if they can play in the fall and they decide to push it to the spring, and then what if it gets worse? Then you not only didn't play in the fall, but you didn't play in the spring, and you lose an entire season.
Exactly. That's another part. That's a lot of fear. So I see why these athletic directors are basically pushing for a fall season. And like you said, we're not even, like, apparently according to a lot of health experts, we're not 100% sure though that this is still technically the first wave. Like, there hasn't really been a second wave yet here in America, according to a lot of health experts. They're saying that the second wave is projected to start in September. So we don't know what it's going to look like between September through December as the regular football season. And then obviously the flu season goes around like November, and so the flu will be mixing up with a strain of the coronavirus as well. So like you said, that was a good point you brought up about the shutdown this past March. So it will be risky, because we saw the XFL shut down completely. So we don't want that to happen with college football, to go to a point where they start playing and then where it gets so ugly that they have to shut the entire season down. And we definitely don't want to see that happen this fall as well. So like July is a crucial month, and early August is like you said, there's going to be decisions being made. So you feel like these next 2 weeks are going to be probably the most important weeks in terms of college football starting?
Yeah, absolutely, because you've seen a number of commissioners and athletic directors come out publicly and talk about their concern for the upcoming season. Notre Dame athletic director Jack Swarbrick said that, look, if things keep trending the way they are, it doesn't look good, and college football could be a victim of that. Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, also the past few days has said in multiple interviews that, if things don't get better, there's a very likelihood there may not be football in the fall. The same with Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren. He said the same thing. I mean, I talk to these people a lot privately. They share a lot of that with me privately, but when they come out and say it publicly, that tells you how serious it is, because they all want to be upbeat. They all want to be positive. And so they don't want to give the impression that, all hope is lost. And I don't think it is by any means, but certainly when you've got these individuals, commissioners, athletic directors coming out and being quoted with their names on it and saying how concerned they are with the upcoming football season, I think that's really worrisome. A few months ago, I did, for the past 3 months, I've done some stories for Stadium Network, talking to all the athletic directors about the upcoming season. In April, I asked them how optimistic they were for the upcoming season. Only one of the 130 ADs told me that they thought there would not be a football season. I asked that same question last week. That number was now up to 8 athletic directors who told me they didn't think we'd have a season. And then to kind of give you a quick example, what I was talking about when people talk publicly and privately, in the past couple of weeks, there's in my AD polls are confidential, so I can't share who these individuals were. But in the past 2 weeks, there's been a couple of athletic directors that have been interviewed and asked about their thoughts on the upcoming season. And both of them said, we're optimistic. We think this is going to get done. Well, when I asked them privately 2 weeks ago, both individuals told me they don't think there's going to be football in the fall. So I kind of read between the lines when I see these people being quoted publicly, but when they do express their concern, that just tells me how much they're really fearing that we may not have football in the fall.
Yeah, exactly. And just like going off of what you said, those polls, like having these surveys, it just seems like it gets worse each week, and that's not a good sign. And I also noticed, like with summer workouts, because I've seen a lot of videos as far as schools like University of Tennessee, Oklahoma State, Michigan, with their strength and conditioning programs that they have throughout the summer workout sessions. Obviously, I see the guys are obviously wearing masks. They're within 6 feet from apart, and it seems like there's a limited amount of players working out at once. It's not, you don't see all 50 to 100 players all together in the weight room. It seems like they split it up now. And I notice the times are different. I notice they're not out there. They're not working out as long or as much as they do when things were normal, right? So just seeing that. And plus, I noticed a lot of schools, it varied when their start date was for summer workouts. For example, Oklahoma didn't start theirs until this month, actually, early this month, and whereas Oklahoma State started theirs in May. Most schools started in May in the Big 12. When you look at other conferences around, it just varied when they started their summer workouts. So it's just very confusing on how they're able to, basically conduct these workouts and make sure everybody stays in shape and stays healthy, because they also had to, obviously conduct tests for every player. So every player was required to get tested for COVID, and the ones that tested positive obviously had to be in quarantine and couldn't really be seen for, at least 14 days. So it just seems like there's a lot of uncertainty going around even with summer workouts.
Well, it is, yeah. Different schools have decided to come in at different times. You've had East Carolina earlier this week. They suspended their voluntary workouts. Last week, Ohio State suspended workouts, and because of that is an outbreak of the virus. But then you've seen other schools, I believe Maryland, Iowa, Michigan, where they only have like 1 or 2 positive tests out of a couple of hundred of student athletes or coaches and staff. So it is kind of fascinating how you've got different positive rates all over the country. University of Florida earlier this week put out their numbers. They've got about a 12% positive rate out of almost nearly 300 tests. So, that's the thing. It's going to be tricky and not one size fits all. And that's why these individual conferences are going to figure out what's best for their individual conference and then just plow forward and hopefully we can get a season in.
Exactly. And then, so based off your expertise and your experience with all these teams and talking to all these athletic directors and players and coaches, so if you were to go from a scale from 1 to 10, where do you see the cost? I know this is a lot. This is hypothetically speaking, but where do you see the season actually having at least 6 games this fall, or probably going into the spring? So on a scale from 1 to 10, where do you think college football will start this fall? And on a scale from 1 to 10, where do you place your vote for a spring season, from just based off of what you've seen or heard?
I'll say there's a 0% chance we start on time in the fall, and I'll say there's about a 25% chance that we play football at all in the fall. And then if we don't play in the fall, then they will try to play in the spring. But it's not just as simple as let's move everything to the spring, because we talked about all the challengers before. There are some university presidents that necessarily don't want to play in the spring. If they can't play in the fall, they won't play in the spring. So it'll all boil down to surprise, surprise money and how much money they can recoup by playing in the spring, and how much financial losses they'll take if they don't play. But to answer your initial question, I know you're too young, but for anybody Animal House fans out there, John Blutarski's grade point average 0.0. That's the percent chance I'm giving the season starting on time, and I'll say about a 25% chance that we play football at all in the fall.
Yeah, those are really bad numbers too.
And Mark, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm just telling you what I think.
I don't blame you for that at all. I don't blame you because, like we said, we're seeing a large spike in cases, and it just seems like most states are running out of ICU beds, and hospitals are being overwhelmed with a bunch of patients, and then there's other patients with heart disease that can't even find a bed for them. So it's just a lot of chaos right now in the majority of the U.S. And I also noticed another thing is the fact that a lot of schools have canceled in-person classes is also absurd, because if you were to have an actual football season, there's no in-person class. Everything's going to be virtual, right? So everything's going to be online. And that's another thing that'll definitely throw a lot of people off, because players are used to most players, unless you're like a super famous player, most players are usually taking courses it's like hybrid. Mainly half of their courses are going to be online, the other half is going to be in person. It just depends on their schedule, right? But to see in-person classes canceled completely will definitely throw them off a game. And plus, I mean, you can't really, even if there was a season this fall, say there is, say we were wrong and there is a football season this fall, I mean, how many, can they play with fans at all? That's the question too, because I mean, I guess it varies from state to state, but I personally don't see even a 50% capacity in most stadiums.
Yeah, well, University of Michigan announced, today that they would have reduced seating or possibly no fans at all this year. And they would make a determination at a later date. I know a number of NFL teams have said they're hoping to get maybe 25% capacity. I think you'll see similar numbers on the college ranks. But, yeah, there's no way you're going to have more fans than that. And as far as the students being on campus and taking classes on campus, a few months ago, the thinking was that all of the student bodies needed to be back on campus to have a football season. Well, the commissioners have kind of tweaked that to now that they need to have some of the student body back on campus. So does that mean you have 100 students back? Does that mean you have 1,000? We're certainly not going to see 20, 30, 40,000 students back on campus like last year. But certainly if you can have a small group of students on campus, you'll have the student athletes back on campus and they'll try to play. And like you said, it'll be a combination of online classes or on campus and online hybrid models. But again, they're trying to do everything they can to play football if they can guarantee the health and safety of the student athletes.
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, it's just like you said, there's a lot of uncertainty right now. And the way I visualize it is that the fact that they're bringing something up every day, it's like they're indecisive right now. I mean, the fact that they're still
they're not indecisive. They don't know. I mean, it's not that believe me, I know people want to be critical of them and say, make up your mind, what are you going to do? But you've still got a couple of weeks, and so they don't want to announce plans right now. I talked to an athletic director this morning from a Power 5 conference, and he said, Brett, he goes, I can't tell you how many plans we've made, and then literally 36 hours they're outdated. It's almost like making your plans, drawing them in the sand by the beach, and the waves come up and wash them away. I mean, things change so frequently. And so that's what's really hard and tough for these people. And, keep in mind, this is the summer. I think people forget that sometimes. This is the summer, this is supposed to be the downtime in college athletics. And all these people working to save a season, the administrators, the coaches, the commissioners, the athletic directors, this is supposed to be, where they kind of catch their breath and recharge their batteries from the previous year. And everybody's worked more since the pandemic happened, because now instead of being able to have meetings in person, you've got to jump on all these different conference calls and Zoom meetings. And I've had numerous ADs tell me that they're spending more time doing stuff because they're having to do all these meetings, via video than they were when they could just meet with people in person and take care of everything and move on.
Yeah, you're right. That is a great perspective, because like you said, it is summertime. It's supposed to be slow, but I feel bad for these athletic directors and coaches, even the players, because that's a lot of pressure that's put on them right now because they don't know what to do and they're just waiting on results, and it just seems like things are not really getting any better in terms of like the virus slowing down. It just seems like it just continued to wreak havoc among, just individuals all over the country. So it just even within their own department too. So it's like you said, I just feel bad because of all the pressure they have, and it just seems like I can't really imagine. I can't really put myself in their shoes right now because we've never seen anything like this before, and then that's why I respect even you guys too, the reporters, because you have to put out stories too, and you guys it's your job to get as much information as possible so you can put it on the beat. And I noticed that it just seems like it just doesn't seem fair for, like you said, for people to be criticizing them like they know what's happening behind closed doors, and the fact that players, they're trying to keep everybody safe. This is something that we've never seen before. So they're trying to do everything in their power to make sure there is a season, and then to have pressure throughout the summer and all this stress, it's just going to be hard on them. It's going to take a toll, obviously, leading into the season if there is one.
Right. They've got, they've got plans on what they want to do going forward, but they just can't implement those plans until they know, what the numbers are as far as the virus. So, one AD summed it up to me best. They said, look, if anyone tells you they know definitively what's going to happen in the fall with college football, they're lying, because nobody, and I mean nobody, knows what's going to happen unless you're the Ivy League. Okay, you're not going to play football in the fall. That's a definite. The Patriot League, the junior colleges, they know they're not going to play football in the fall. That's a definite. The Big Ten, the Pac-12, yeah, they want to play a conference-only schedule, but they don't even know how many games they're going to play. They're not simply picking up the conference schedule that they had before, because now you've got rid of all your non-conference games. So now you got to move the schedule around. They want to add additional open dates in case there are outbreaks of the virus and teams have to cancel games. So you have the opportunity to possibly reschedule games. They're shifting opponents around. So even the Big Ten and the Pac-12, while they've made their announcement that they want to go conference only, they also don't know 100% what's going to happen. So that's what's so challenging for all these people is everybody wants to know, everybody wants an answer, and to be very honest, no one knows right now. So I know it sucks if you're a college football fan, but you're going to have to wait for a few more weeks until we know. And you know what? There's a possibility when we get to that point, they may say, you know what, we're going to need more time. We can't make a decision right now.
Exactly, and like you said, it's going to hurt recruiting. They're going to have to figure that out. And plus, like you said, if there's a spring, I like how you brought that up, how that's going to determine who's going to go first round and how they're going to prepare themselves for the draft and the combine. That's just going to be a lot of chaos. So it's like, I would rather have everybody safe. I'd rather have everybody be safe than to go out there and just force everybody to play. Not play against the unknown, meaning that we have no idea how bad the virus can actually get, and actually putting everybody at risk like that, because coaches are much older than the players are. So coaches who are 55 plus, that won't be fair for them if they were to test positive, or anybody that's immunocompromised. I'm pretty sure some of these players have underlying health conditions too. So that's another thing that we have to watch out for. So that's why I'd rather everybody be 100% safe than to go out there and throw them. It's basically like throwing them into the fire without any preparation.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're trying to figure out right now. Trying to get more information, get more data, and ultimately, I kind of mentioned earlier, the decision ultimately will be made by not only university presidents but also by the local and state health officials on whether we have college football in the fall or not.
Exactly, and then I also wanted to bring this up. So I know you're on a time crunch, so I wanted to ask this real quick. Do you have any additional thoughts that you'd like to share, just in case I miss anything important?
No, you've covered it all. It's frustrating. You can't definitively say, hey, this is what's going to happen. You mentioned, the importance of wearing a mask. There's a lot of conferences and coaches have put stuff out on social media encouraging fans to wear a mask. I think Walmart is now requires masks. Customers want to enter their store, and part of the reason is to help save college football. So, that would be the best message I could give everybody, and hopefully we have some type of season. But with all the uncertainties, the only certainty that I can guarantee is this will be in anybody's lifetime.
Agreed. I really hope we don't see anything like this again. I hope this is just a bite in the butt, just like the Spanish flu 100 years ago. And, chances are nobody is around today from that time period. So like you said, like a once-in-a-lifetime deal. I'm hoping that we don't see anything like this ever again in our lifetime for sure. And I'm hoping if something like this were to come again in the distant future, that we'll be more prepared and have the technology to contain it faster than what's going on right now. Because we just basically just got thrown into the unknown. It's just, I mean, it was uncalled for. We didn't see it coming. So it's just, I mean, there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of uncertainty. It's just really sad how we lost a lot of people. Hundreds of thousands of people have already passed away from this virus. So I'm just hoping that everybody stays safe. I hope that you stay safe, and I appreciate the work you've done, that you put forth, especially working under these conditions. I know it's tough, so I just appreciate everything you do.
Hey, thanks, Mark. I really appreciate you having me on. That means a lot.
Oh, it meant a lot having you on, actually taking time out of your day to get on. So I made sure that I did my research and, try to make sure this was as positive as possible, in midst of all what's going on.
Hey, it sounds good.